The silence in the house was not the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning, but the hollow, echoing stillness of a tomb. I woke up at exactly 6 in the morning, a habit ingrained in me after 40 years as a head librarian in Charleston, South Carolina. Usually, the house would be humming with the subtle sounds of life. There should have been the hiss of the espresso machine, the heavy footsteps of my son, Caleb, or the high-pitched, complaining voice of his fiancée, Serena, asking where her almond milk was. But today, there was nothing. The air felt thin, stripped of its warmth. I swung my legs out of bed, my feet touching the cold heart pine floors that my late husband, Arthur, had restored with his own hands 3 decades ago. I walked into the hallway, pulling my robe tighter around me, fighting a sudden shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. When I reached the top of the staircase, I stopped. The large oil painting of the harbor that usually greeted me from the landing wall was gone. A rectangular patch of pale paint, like a ghost, was all that remained where the frame had hung for 20 years. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of panic. I hurried down the stairs, my hand slipping on the banister because my palms were suddenly sweating. I turned the corner into the living room and gasped, a sound that seemed too loud in the empty space. It was gone. All of it. The Victorian velvet sofa where I had nursed Caleb when he was a baby. The mahogany coffee table Arthur had commissioned for our 10th anniversary. The antique floor lamps, the Persian rugs, even the heavy silk drapes were missing, leaving the windows naked and exposing the room to the harsh morning light. I ran to the dining room, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The room was stripped bare. The 12-seater oak table, the buffet, the china cabinet that held 4 generations of family silver and Waterford crystal, everything had vanished. It wasn't a robbery in the traditional sense. There was no broken glass, no forced entry. The house had been surgically gutted. I sprinted to the kitchen. The refrigerator was still there, but the copper cookware collection that had hung from the ceiling rack was missing. I opened the pantry. It was empty. Not just the food, but the jars, the spices, the baskets. They had taken everything. My knees gave way, and I slid down the kitchen cabinets until I hit the floor. My phone was in my pocket. My hands trembled so violently I dropped it twice before I could unlock it. I dialed Caleb. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice groggy but underscored with the ambient noise of wind and distant, tropical music. "Hey, Mom, is everything okay? You're calling early." "Caleb." My voice was a croak. I swallowed and tried again. "Caleb, the house. Everything is gone. The furniture, the silver, the paintings. Someone broke in. They took everything." There was a pause on the other end. A long, stretching silence that told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. Then I heard a giggle in the background. It was Serena. "Mom, relax," Caleb said, his tone shifting from groggy to dismissive. "Nobody broke in. We just liquidate some assets." "Liquidated?" I whispered, the room spinning. "Those aren't assets, Caleb. That is my home. Those are my things. Arthur's things." "Don't be so dramatic, Nora," Serena's voice cut in, closer to the phone now. "We needed the cash. You know how stressed we've been about the wedding and everything. Plus, Caleb and I really needed a mental health break. We're in Bali. It's gorgeous here. You should see the villa." "Bali? You sold my life to go to Bali?" "Mom, stop," Caleb said, sounding annoyed now, like a teenager being asked to clean his room. "You always say we should prioritize experiences over material possessions. The house was too cluttered anyway. We did you a favor. It's minimalism. It's trendy. Besides, Serena deserves this. She's been working so hard on her brand." "Her brand? She hasn't worked a day since she moved in 2 years ago." "You're being toxic, Mom," Caleb sighed. "Look, the signal is choppy. We'll bring you back a sarong or something. We'll be back in 3 weeks. Don't do anything crazy. Love you." The line went dead. I sat there on the cold kitchen tiles of my empty house, the phone slipping from my fingers. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the empty space where my life used to be. My name is Nora Vance. I am 62 years old. I have spent my entire life preserving stories, protecting history, and nurturing my family. I built this life brick by brick, book by book. And in that moment, sitting in the wreckage of my son's betrayal, something inside the soft, accommodating mother finally died. And from the ashes, a woman of iron resolve began to rise. This would not be a story of a victim, it would be a lesson in consequences. To understand how a son could do this to his own mother, you have to understand how the poison entered our lives. It began 2 years ago on a rainy Tuesday. My life before that was peaceful. I had been a widow for 8 years, but I was content. I had my garden, my book club, my volunteer work at the Historical Society, and a house that smelled of lavender and old paper. Then Caleb came home. He was 27, handsome, charming, but always drifting, looking for the easy path he felt he was owed. He brought Serena with him. She was stunning in a sharp, angular way, with eyes that assessed the value of everything they touched. They stood on my porch, soaked and pitiful. They had been evicted from their trendy downtown loft. Unfair landlord, Caleb had said. A misunderstanding about the rent, Serena had added. They needed a place to stay for just a few weeks. How could I say no? He was my boy. The boy who used to bring me dandelions. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. Come in, I had said. This is your home. The first month was bearable. I cooked, they ate, I cleaned, they slept. Serena would come down at noon, wearing silk pajamas that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and complain about the noise of the vacuum cleaner. But I held my tongue. Family first. That was the code Arthur and I lived by. But a few weeks turned into 6 months, then a year. Slowly, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It was like living with a gas leak, invisible, but suffocating. Serena began to make small comments. Why do you keep all these old books, Nora? They smell musty. Why don't you sell that silver tea set? You never use it. It's just sitting there gathering dust. It's selfish, really, hoarding wealth like that when Caleb is trying to get his startup off the ground. Caleb's startup was a vague concept about lifestyle consulting that never seemed to generate income, only expenses. He needed new suits to look the part. He needed a membership at the exclusive city club to network. And who paid? I did. Because when I hesitated, Serena would whisper in his ear, and Caleb would look at me with those big, wounded eyes and say, Mom, don't you believe in me? Dad would have supported me. That was the dagger they used. Dad would have supported me. They knew I would do anything to fill the void Arthur left behind. The turning point happened 3 months before the Bali trip. I had come home early from the library. The house was quiet, but I heard voices in the master bedroom, my bedroom. I walked softly up the stairs, the carpet muffling my steps. The door was ajar. Serena was standing at my vanity, wearing my diamond necklace, the one Arthur gave me when Caleb was born. Caleb was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling on his phone. It looks better on me, Serena said, admiring herself in the mirror. It makes Nora look old. It ages her. It's nice, babe, Caleb mumbled, not looking up. We should pawn it, Serena said casually, as if suggesting we order pizza. The vintage setting is tacky, but the stones are good quality. We could get maybe $5,000. That covers the deposit for the venue. Caleb finally looked up. We can't pawn her necklace, Serena. She'd notice. She notices nothing, Serena laughed. A cold, sharp sound. She's getting senile. Haven't you seen how she forgets where her glasses are? She's losing it. By the time she realizes it's gone, we'll be married and rich. Besides, once you get power of attorney, it won't matter. We can put her in that facility on the edge of town, the one that accepts state aid. Then we sell the house, and we are free. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand covering my mouth to stifle a gasp. Power of attorney. State aid facility. They weren't just ungrateful, they were planning my demise. They were plotting to erase me. I backed away slowly, went downstairs, and slammed the front door as if I had just arrived. When I went upstairs later, the necklace was back in its velvet box, but the trust was gone, shattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went into the guest study, which they had commandeered as their office. I needed to know the extent of it. I found a leather-bound planner on the desk. It was labeled The Empire Project. I opened it. It wasn't a business plan for a startup. It was a timeline of exploitation. Phase 1. Move in. Establish dominance. Phase 2. Financial integration. Get access to credit cards. Phase 3. Liquidation of non-essential assets, antiques. Phase 4. The takeover. Transfer of deed. Nora to nursing home. The handwriting was Serena's, sharp and jagged. But there were notes in the margins in Caleb's scrawl. Agreed. Mom won't fight this. She's too soft. Too soft. I closed the book. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, blinding rage. They thought I was soft because I was kind. They mistook my generosity for weakness. They didn't know that before I was a librarian, before I was a mother, I was the daughter of a military prosecutor. I knew how to build a case. I knew how to document evidence. And I knew how to execute a judgment. I didn't confront them then. I waited. I watched. I documented. I took photos of the planner. I recorded their conversations when they thought I was asleep. And when I woke up to an empty house and the news that they were in Bali, I knew the time for gathering evidence was over. The time for sentencing had begun. I stood up from the kitchen floor. I wiped the tears from my face. I looked around at the hollow shell of my home, and I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a general surveying the battlefield before the final strike. I had 3 weeks, 21 days before they returned. It was more than enough time. My first call was not to the police, but to Mr. Abernathy, my family attorney. He was an old Southern gentleman who wore bow ties and had a mind like a steel trap. I met him in his office an hour later, looking disheveled but focused. I laid the photos of the planner on his desk. I showed him the list of missing items. I played him the recording of the phone call from Bali. "This is grand larceny, Nora," Mr. Abernathy said, his face turning a shade of purple. "And elder abuse. We can have them arrested the moment they step off the plane." "No," I said calmly. "Arresting them is too easy. It's too quick. They'll play the victim. Caleb will cry. Serena will manipulate the narrative. I don't just want them punished by the law. I want them to understand what it means to have nothing. I want to teach them the lesson I failed to teach my son growing up, that actions have consequences." "What do you want to do?" Abernathy asked, leaning forward. "I want to legally evict them, bar them from the property, and secure my assets so tightly that not even a whisper of their influence can touch them. And then I want to prepare a welcome home party." The next 3 weeks were a blur of calculated activity. I hired a forensic locksmith to change every lock on the property, including the windows. I installed a high-definition security system with audio recording capabilities. I hired a private investigator to track the sale of my items. It turned out they had sold everything to a shady estate liquidator 2 towns over for a fraction of the value. I managed to buy back the family Bible and Arthur's favorite armchair, but the rest was gone. The silver, the paintings, the memories lost to fund cocktails in Bali. I went to the bank and moved my accounts to a new institution. I set up a trust that explicitly stated that in the event of my death or incapacitation, my assets would go to a foundation for literacy and historical preservation. Caleb was disinherited completely unless he met specific, rigorous criteria of rehabilitation overseen by a board of trustees. Then, I dealt with their possessions. They had left their rooms filled with their clothes, their gadgets, their expensive shoes. I didn't burn them. I didn't throw them in the street. I was better than that. I hired a professional moving company. I had them pack every single item belonging to Caleb and Serena into boxes. I labeled them meticulously. Then, I had them moved to the old carriage house at the back of the property, a small, uninsulated brick structure that we used for garden storage. I printed out the photos of the Empire Project planner. I blew them up to poster size. I hung them on the walls of the carriage house, a gallery of their betrayal. I also spent time on myself. I went to the salon and cut my hair into a sharp, chic bob. I bought new clothes, tailored suits, vibrant colors. I stopped looking like the soft, accommodating mother they mocked. I looked like the woman I was meant to be. On the day of their return, I sat on my new sofa, a modest, modern piece I had bought for myself. I drank tea from a simple mug. The house was sparse, echoing, but it felt clean. It felt mine. The taxi pulled up at 4 in the afternoon. I watched the monitor of my security system. They looked tan, golden, and happy. Serena was wearing a new designer sundress. Caleb had a new watch. They hauled their suitcases up the porch steps, laughing. I heard the sound of the key scratching against the lock. Then the confusion. Then the jiggling of the handle. Then the doorbell. I waited. I let them ring it 3 times. Then I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. "Mom?" Caleb asked, blinking behind his sunglasses. "What's wrong with the lock? We've been trying to get in for 5 minutes." "Hello, Caleb?" "Hello, Serena," I said, my voice steady and cool. "I see you enjoyed Bali." "Yeah, it was amazing," Serena said, pushing past Caleb. "Move, Nora, I need to pee. It's been a long flight." She tried to step inside, but I blocked the doorway. I didn't shove her. I just stood there, an immovable object. "You can't come in," I said. "Excuse me?" Serena scoffed. "Get out of the way." "You don't live here anymore," I said. Caleb laughed, a nervous, confused sound. "Mom, stop joking. We're tired. Let us in." "I'm not joking, Caleb. You sold my furniture. You sold my silver. You gutted my home to pay for a vacation you felt you deserved. You forfeited your right to live under this roof the moment you decided to steal from me." "Steal?" Caleb's face went red. "It wasn't stealing. It was borrowing against future inheritance." "You aren't inheriting anything," I said. "I changed my will last week." The color drained from Serena's face. "You what?" I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me, the new lock clicking with a definitive sound. "You are trespassers. I have a restraining order ready to be filed if you don't leave the property. However, since I am not a monster, I have packed your belongings. They are in the carriage house." "The carriage house?" Serena shrieked. "It's full of spiders. My Gucci bags are in there?" "You're lucky they aren't in a dumpster," I said. "You have 24 hours to remove your things. After that, I'm donating them to charity." "Mom, please." Caleb stepped forward, his eyes filling with tears. "This is insane. Where are we supposed to go? We spent all our money on the trip. We don't have anywhere to stay." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you sold my dining table," I said, "or before you wrote out your plan to put me in a state facility." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Caleb looked at Serena. Serena looked at the ground. You saw that?" Caleb whispered. "I saw everything. I documented everything. Phase 4. The takeover. It was very thorough, Serena." Serena lunged at me. "You witch! You snooping old hag! I'll sue you! I'll take this house from you." I didn't flinch. I pointed to the small black camera mounted above the door. "You're being recorded, Serena, and I have the best lawyer in Charleston on speed dial. One more threat, and you'll spend your first night back in a holding cell." Serena stopped. She looked at the camera, then at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. She realized the game was over. Caleb looked at me, searching for the mother who would always forgive him, the mother who would smooth everything over. He didn't find her. "Mom, I'm sorry," he sobbed, reaching out a hand. "She made me do it. I didn't want to." I looked at his hand, then at his face. "That is the most pathetic thing I have ever heard, Caleb. You are a grown man. Nobody makes you do anything. You chose her. You chose the money. You chose the easy way. Now, you have to choose how to survive." I turned around and put the key in the lock. "Mom!" Caleb screamed. "Don't do this! I love you!" I paused. "I love you too, Caleb. I love you enough to let you grow up." Finally. I went inside and locked the door. I watched on the monitor as they dragged their suitcases down the driveway toward the carriage house. I watched Serena screaming at Caleb, hitting his chest. I watched Caleb sit on the grass and put his head in his hands. It broke my heart. It shattered it into a million pieces. I slid down the door and wept until my throat was raw. But I didn't open the door. That was 5 years ago. The first year was the hardest. The silence was deafening. I missed my son every day. I missed the idea of him. But I filled the void with purpose. I started the Phoenix Initiative, a foundation dedicated to helping older women protect their assets and recover from financial abuse by family members. It turns out, my story wasn't unique. I met hundreds of women who had been erased by their children, their spouses, their relatives. We built a community. We fought back. I heard rumors about them, of course. Charleston is a small town. They lived in a cheap motel for a week until the money ran out. Then they moved into a basement apartment in a rough part of town. Serena left Caleb 2 months later. Without my money to siphon, she saw no value in him. She tried to latch onto a wealthy tourist, but her reputation had spread. The last I heard, she was working as a hostess in a dive bar in Myrtle Beach, looking 10 years older than her age. Caleb hit rock bottom. He was evicted from the apartment. He spent a few nights in his car. Then, he did something surprising. He didn't call me for money. He got a job. He started working construction, hard, physical labor. He learned what it meant to sweat for $1. He wrote me letters. For the first 6 months, I didn't open them. I just kept them in a box. I wasn't ready. Then, on a Tuesday, exactly a year after the Bali incident, I opened the first one. "Dear Mom," it said, "I'm sorry. I know that word means nothing to you now. But I am working. I am paying for my own rent. I look at my hands, covered in calluses, and I think about Dad. I think about how he built that house. I understand now. I understand the value of things. I miss you." I didn't reply. Not yet. He kept writing. Once a month. He told me about his job. He told me he was taking night classes to finish his business degree the real way, not with shortcuts. He told me he was volunteering at a food bank. 2 years after the eviction, I was sitting in my garden, reading a book. The garden was blooming, vibrant with azaleas and hydrangeas. I looked up and saw a man standing at the gate. He was thinner, tanned from the sun, his hands rough. He wasn't wearing a designer suit. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. "Hello, Mom," Caleb said. I put down my book. "Hello, Caleb. I didn't come to ask for anything," he said quickly. I wanted to see you. You look great. You look strong." "I am strong," I said. He nodded. "I know. I'm proud of you." That struck me. He was proud of me, not for what I could give him, but for who I was. I invited him onto the porch. We didn't hug. Not yet. I brought him a glass of lemonade. We sat in the rocking chairs and talked. He told me about his life. It was a hard life, a modest life, but it was his. He wasn't lying anymore. He wasn't scheming. The gaslighting was gone, replaced by a humble honesty that suited him. We started to rebuild, slowly, carefully, like repairing a piece of broken china with gold lacquer kintsugi. The Japanese call it. The cracks are visible, but they make the object more beautiful, more real. He never asked to move back in. He knew that door was closed. He knew that the only way to be a man was to stand on his own 2 feet. Last week, I celebrated my 67th birthday. Caleb came over. He brought a gift. It wasn't expensive. It was a small, framed watercolor painting of the Charleston Harbor. He had painted it himself. "I'm no artist," he laughed shyly. "But I remembered how much you loved that painting I sold. I wanted to give you something back, even if it's just a shadow of what was lost." I hung it in the hallway, right where the old masterpiece used to be. It wasn't worth thousands of dollars. It was clumsy and imperfect. But to me, it was priceless. People often ask me if I regret being so harsh, if I regret kicking my own son out onto the street. And I look them in the eye and I say, no. Because love isn't just about giving. It isn't just about saying yes and smoothing over the rough edges. Sometimes, the most profound act of love is to let someone fall. Sometimes, you have to burn the forest down to let the new growth come through. I didn't kick Caleb out because I hated him. I kicked him out because I loved him too much to let him remain a thief and a coward. I saved my dignity that day. But in doing so, I also saved my son. I look around my house now. It's different. The furniture is new. The memories are new. It's quieter, but it's a peaceful quiet. It's the quiet of a life lived on my own terms. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see a victim. I see Nora Vance, the woman who refused to be erased. Have you ever loved someone so much that you had to break their heart to save their soul? It's a terrible, beautiful thing, but looking at the man my son has become, I know I made the right choice. The deepest wounds leave the strongest scars, and we are both stronger now.